Hi, my name is Kara Kelly, and I'm gonna show you this PowerPoint over CA number 3. It's a historical timeline about how certain cases and laws have influenced ELLs or English language learners throughout the years. And here we go. Let's get started. So the first one was Plessy v. Ferguson, which was issued in 1896. The U.S. Supreme Court issued this decision, which stated, quote, separate but equal. Public facilities, including schools, are constitutional. Even though the decision was mostly related to the segregation of African American students, it still included Native American, Asian, and Hispanic students. These students were also routinely segregated. 58 years later, the Supreme Court reversed Plessy v. Ferguson into Brown v. Board of Education. Although this law stated the separate facilities had to be equal, this didn't always happen most of the time. So it wasn't always true, and that's how it kind of influenced ELLs is they said it was equal, but it wasn't, and they were still being segregated, and their education was being diminished. The next one was Meyer v. Nebraska, which was issued in 1923. This case addressed the issue of private language schooling for language minority students. Myers made it clear by restating the 14th Amendment, which provides protection for language minorities. In contrast, Nebraska passed the Simmons Act, which made it illegal for any school to provide any foreign language instruction to students below the 8th grade. This influenced ELLs because it took away their rights and privileges to be taught in a language that they were most comfortable speaking and using, especially in the classroom. The next one is Farrington v. Tokushige, which was issued in 1927. In this case, the court offered further protections of after-school community language programs after education authorities tried to put restrictions on Japanese and Chinese heritage language programs. This influenced ELLs because it restricted them from learning their heritage language and keeping that in the school, and so they struggled. The next one is Independent School Districts v. Salvatierra, which was issued in 1930. This case had to do with Mexican American parents who lived in a small border town called Rio, Texas. They brought suit against the school district because of segregation. The court ended up siding with the school district, who argued that segregation was necessary to teach the students English. This influenced ELLs because it separated them from other cultures and was not beneficial to students' English language development. The next one is Alvarez v. Lemon Grove, which was issued in 1931. This case had to do with an incident that occurred in Lemon Grove, California, where a local school attempted to build a separate school for children of the Mexican origin. This happened to be a violation of the California state laws because Mexicans or Mexican Americans were considered white under the state's education code. Alvarez stated that segregation wasn't beneficial to students who were trying to develop their English language. This influenced ELLs because it was one of the first victories over segregative educational practices, and was a testimony to Mexican immigrant parents who used the U.S. legal system to protect their children's rights. The next one is Mendez v. Westminster School District, which was issued in 1947. This case helped set the stage for Brown v. Board of Education and was very similar to the Lemon Grove case or incident. Mendez was a Mexican American student who was put in a segregated classroom at Westminster. The state of California didn't allow the segregation of Mexican American origin because they were considered white in the state education laws or codes. Although many students in schools argued that Mexican American students need special training in English in order for them to stay on the same grade level, but this wasn't allowed at the time. So Mexican American or ELLs struggled because they were always having to catch up and they weren't on the same grade level because they weren't getting special training from teachers in learning English. The next one is Brown v. Board of Education, which was issued in 1954. This case focused more on the issue on segregation of African Americans. It ruled that all states are responsible for providing, quote, equal educational opportunities for all ethnicities and students. Brown made bilingual education for ELLs more accessible and available, feasible, all of the above. And that's how it influenced ELLs because he made it more available for them and it helped them learn the English language better. The next one is San Antonio Independent School District versus Rodriguez, which was issued in 1973. This case dealt with inequalities in school funding, which meant that minority schools were receiving less funding than schools that mostly served white students. It was argued under the 14th Amendment, but the U.S. Supreme Court ruled over it that there is no fundamental right to bilingual education by the Constitution. This influenced ELLs because of these minority schools that were getting less funding, they didn't have the same resources as the predominant white schools. So they were struggling because all these white schools had more resources and then these minority schools were lacking those resources because they were getting less money. And so therefore these ELs weren't getting the education they needed because they didn't have the resources. The next one is Law v. Nichols, which was issued in 1974. This case resulted in the most important court decision regarding the education of language minority students. It was brought up by Chinese American students who were placed in separate and isolated classrooms because of their lack of proficiency in English. This influenced ELLs because it left them to, quote, sink or swim in their English development. So they were kind of on their own, and the next one is they were left behind, which they were kind of left behind in this one, and that's not acceptable because they were needed to be kind of focused on more than a student that does know English because you can sink and swim and get kind of lost very easily being an ELL. The next one is No Child Left Behind Act, which was issued in 2001. This act was issued to make sure no child was left behind and that they were all accommodated for. The school districts in their states must in detail describe how they are incorporating language instruction in the curriculum. That was tied to teaching ELLs, and it has been proven to be successful throughout the years. This influences ELLs because it makes sure all of them are accommodated for, and by law, schools are accountable for increasing English proficiency. So through this act, teachers and schools were just accountable for that, and so they made sure to really incorporate that language instruction and really tie it to ELLs and make sure they were accommodated for. And my last slide is my references. I hope you enjoyed my PowerPoint over the historical timeline of how ELLs were influenced. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.